Mm. Good evening,
Excellent.
UK Crime Book Club. Hello, welcome to the wonderful Sheila Bugler. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you very much. Now, we have had a few technical glitches, haven't we, as we got this set up? So fingers crossed
We have.
we'll get through this without any more.
We have got a lot of questions. Oh no. Right, I can't see you, but if we give it a second, your image might come back again. But can I hear you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good,
Okay.
yeah. So we know that there might be some dropping in and out. So you're coming back now. There you go.
Okay.
So don't panic.
Sorry about this.
Off again. we'll just keep stopping and we won't stop. We'll keep talking while I keep putting you back in. So
okay,
first off, show us your latest book, the one that I'm reading at the moment.
Okay, so this is my latest book, which is called I Could Be You. There we go. And that is my latest book. It starts starring. It's got a new heroine in it called Dee Doran. And she's a journalist. She lives in Eastbourne, where the novels are set. I Could Be You is the first in the series, and the second is When the Dead Speak, which came out on the 9th of July. So you're reading it at the moment, aren't you?
I am. So I finished the first Ellen Kelly book yesterday, and then spent today reading I Could Be You.
Goodness me.
Fantastic. So I'm up to chapter 39 at the moment. So so I can't say too much about it because I don't want to give anything away.
Oh, okay, I can see exactly where you are. I'm just looking at the book now, actually. Oh, okay, excellent, right. Well, you have to let me know when you're finished it, what you think, yeah?
I will do. I sat last night until I finished, what's the first one? Hunting Evil.
Hunting Shadows.
Shadows, thank you. I knew I was getting there. So I finished that one, but I didn't go to sleep last night until I'd finished it.
Oh, good. So, thank you.
I couldn't put it down.
Oh, that's so lovely. It's so funny.
And I can't wait to see what happens next because I've got 2 more Ellen Kellys to read. So I'm really excited about that. I love it when I find a new series.
Yeah. Oh, well, I hope
get
you enjoy the rest of the I might finish that series sometimes. There's only 3 books so far in this series. I initially planned 6 books, but then my publisher decided not to do any more crime fiction, long story. But maybe I'll do more.
Well, we're going to have to change the mind. Either that or you're just going to have to write it and sell it to me.
Okay, definitely.
So we've got a few questions on the feed, but we've got some on Facebook from before we started. So Robert Crouch would like to know, who's your inspiration when it comes to writing and why? And he says all the best.
Oh, thank you, Robert. I like Robert. Who's my inspiration? I don't have, in terms of writing, I don't have an inspiration for why I write. I think that's just what I've always wanted to do. But I certainly do have, my characters are definitely inspired by people. And one of the things that I talk about quite a lot actually is, so if you've read Hunting Shadows and you're also reading I Could Be You, they both feature really strong female characters.
Absolutely.
And I think it was really important to me to write really strong female characters, you know, because I've got loads of strong female friends. I think women are amazing. And also with Ellen and Dee, they're quite different characters as well. So they're both really strong. But Ellen is a much more controlled character. She's very, very high control personality. She's a single mother. She's got a lot of responsibilities. And I wrote her at a time when I was juggling being a working mother and looking after 2 young kids. And I really wanted to talk about a woman, because often in crime fiction, your main protagonists are younger women who don't have any responsibilities. And I wanted to really write what it's like for working women who have to juggle a job and being a parent and always feeling that we're doing a really rubbish job with both. Because that was my experience at the time. And I just wanted to write about that. And then with Dee, because I'm older now, and so Dee is in her 50s, and now she doesn't have children. But what I was really interested in writing about Dee was because I've got lots of female friends who are in their 50s and they're separated or they're single. And they're not these little mumsy housewives, middle-aged housewives that you read about when you read about women of that age, especially in crime fiction. You know, they go out, they get drunk, they have really unsuitable romances with unsuitable men, they do all sorts of things that women that age aren't supposed to. And they're also battling with the menopause, which is, again, something that I'm just starting to experience the joys of. So I really wanted to write about that. And Dee is really strongly influenced by a few women I know, actually. And the starting point for her was a very specific woman I know here in Eastbourne, but then she kind of became an amalgamation of loads of women I know. So that's a very long way of saying that my inspiration are really kind of the people I know, I think, more than anything else. I also have a really nasty boss I had one time, and there's a bit of her that features in all my nasty female characters.
I like that. Some people don't like to use anything from anybody they know, and I understand that, but don't mind a bit of revenge on a real person.
Yeah, no, only a little bit, so she'd never know if she read it herself. Yeah. I know she's in there.
So Alison O'Leary, hi Alison, has asked, when did you first become interested in crime fiction, and did any particular author inspire you?
Oh, I love that question. And hello, Alison. Well, I would say probably like lots of the other writers here, my love of crime fiction started as a child when I was with Enid Blyton, basically. And Famous Five, Secret Seven, they were the kind of starting point of the books that I read. And I was a huge reader as a child, but I loved all of the Enid Blyton books. And then I progressed from those books onto the Nancy Drew series, the Hardy Boys.
Nancy Drew, yeah.
I know. Oh my God. So those books, I was obsessed with them. And then when I got slightly older, I always read, I still do, I don't just read crime fiction, but I've always read loads of crime fiction. And then I think the really big inspiration for me in terms of thinking that I wanted to write crime fiction was when I read Harlan Coben, my first few Harlan Coben novels. Right. And I was a really huge fan of his for a while. And I read his novels, and I really strongly remember thinking one day, this is what I want to do. And really kind of reading his books and thinking, how does he do this? And is this something I could do? So he was kind of really, I think, the writer that made me want to write crime fiction. And then obviously since then, I read way more widely than I knew about then. I read very mainstream, what was on the shelves crime fiction then, and I read much more widely now. And also, of course, what I didn't realize, I thought I wanted to write like Harlan Coben, but what I didn't realize is that in a way, you can't really know what sort of writer you are until you start writing. And actually, you kind of, once you are true to yourself, you'll write the type of crime fiction that you're meant to write, even if that's not what you think you're meant to write. And so even though I started off like Harlan Coben, my books are quite different to his, but he was definitely the author I aspired to be like at the beginning.
There was one of his, it wasn't a book, but it was a TV show called The Five, which I'd highly recommend. I couldn't find anything that it was based on that he'd written, but it's one of my favourite things I've ever watched. So I can see the draw of Harlan Coben.
Oh, brilliant.
The lovely Lorraine has asked.
You've lost me again, but I hope you can still hear me.
I have lost you again, but we'll keep going because we can hear you.
Oh, excellent. And I will look out for the 5.
So Lorraine Mace, the lovely Lorraine, has asked, she knows you live in the area where your latest series is set, but how important is it for you to know the location before writing? And would you consider setting a future novel in a place you hadn't visited?
Hello, Lorraine. So do you know what? Sometimes I think I'd love to write a book somewhere I haven't lived. And I have tried that on and off in the past. And actually, with the book I'm writing now, which is a standalone novel, I initially started to write that in a location I didn't know. But it just doesn't work for me. I know it works for lots of other writers, but no, I think location is really important to me. And I need to know a place before I can write about a place, I think. I'd love not to be able to do that. I'd love to be able to just use Google Maps and stuff, but it just doesn't work for me doing it like that. So I tend to always come back to a place I know, actually.
I can understand that, because then you've already got the feel in your head for the place and in your heart sometimes for the place as well.
And I think you have to have that feeling in your heart. So But the only problem with that is that you have to be careful that you don't always go back to the same places. So I've got a few English locations that I always write, which are basically London, Eastbourne and Bristol, because they're 3 places I know and love. But even I'm aware I need to broaden my horizon a little bit away from those areas. And actually, what I'd really like to do is write a novel based in Ireland, because that's where I'm from. And being Irish is a really important part of my identity. But in a way that I can't really explain, I find that really hard to do, to write novel. I think because I'm really aware that I've lived out of Ireland for a long time and I might get lots of things wrong. So I think the only way I could write about Ireland is if I wrote a novel about Ireland set in the 80s, really the Ireland I knew. I'd like to do that sometime, I think.
Sarah Reed has asked, how do you go about planning a new story? Do you plan or fly by the seat of your pants? I love that phrase.
My God, that is such a good question, and it's causing me so much pain at the moment. So basically, my natural way of writing is to write and just see what happens. And that's how I wrote my first few novels. I wrote a book and I let it go wherever it wanted, and then I rewrote it, and I kept doing that until it got to where it was meant to be. But the problem with that is that if, like a lot of other writers, you have a contract and you have to produce a book within a certain amount of time, it's a really ineffective way of writing. And the reason this is such a timely question is that we have another writer in the UK Crime Book Club called Marion Todd. And I know Marion quite well because we both have the same publisher. So we've only got to know each other since we were at the same publisher. But Marion plots her novels like she is a plotter. She plots everything in amazing detail before she starts writing. And we've exchanged lots of messages about how we do it. And I have tried really hard to adopt the Marion Todd method of planning. And I can do it to a point, but I'm just a different writer to Marion. So I've kind of accepted that now what I do is I have a bit of an outline, which does take me quite a while. And then I try to map that out a bit more. But then when I start to write, no matter how hard I try, what happens on the page is really different to my plan. So what I do now is I have a general outline of the story, and that these days that takes me maybe a few weeks to get that right. And then I start writing, and I'll always make sure at the end of one day that I know what's going to happen. I know what I'm going to write about the next day. So I kind of try to write chapter by chapter. So I'll always know what's happening maybe in the next 2 or 3 chapters. But beyond that, I'm just not capable of planning in more detail than I was, because I think it makes you much more effective as a writer, but I just can't do it.
Lorraine Nace has got another question, which is one that I had on my list to ask you. She said, I've read UDI Ellen Kelly series, that was a tongue twister then, and loved them. What made you choose a journalist rather than a police officer for your new series?
Oh, well, no,
I was intrigued by the same thing.
Well, and Lorraine writes really good police procedurals, as you probably know. There's 2 reasons, I guess. The first reason is that I wanted to have a main character as a woman. I'd already done a main character as a police detective. So I kind of thought probably I'd done that a bit. I didn't want to repeat that. And the second and probably more honest part of that answer is that I really hate research. I really hate research. And to write police procedural, you need to do your research really well. So what used to happen with the Ellen Kelly novels, and it would go to my editor, and then my editor would just come back with loads of questions and, saying this is not right, or have you checked this? And of course I hadn't checked any of it. So then what I did with I can see you've lost my face. Can you still hear my voice?
Yeah, I can still hear you, and you're about to come back. There you go, you're back.
So what I did do with Ellen, I contacted Lewisham Police Station, and I sent them an email. It was really funny. I sent an email with a whole list of questions, and I didn't hear anything for ages. And I just thought, they're never going to come back to me. And then about 4 months later, I got this email chain, this huge email chain back from Lewisham Police. So I'd sent it to their kind of press office, and she'd obviously sent it to all of these different people in Lewisham Police Station, and they'd all added in their comments. And I got this massive email chain back, which was really sweet and really lovely. And I think now that I've got more books out, I'd be more confident about approaching police and everything. But I used to be really worried that they would just think I was this stupid person who didn't know anything about their job, which is still true. But at least now I kind of, through my writing, I've got to know people who work in the police who said, if you ever want help, with future novels, probably thinking you really need help. I don't know. But so I've got people I can call on now. so that was kind of why Dee is a journalist. But also, I think being an investigative journalist is just such an interesting job, and I wanted to explore that a little bit. And so they're all those reasons, really.
We've got a question from Sarah Reid. Do you know Sarah Reid by any chance?
I do know Sarah Reid, actually. Yeah.
She said, what has Dee got against Sovereign Harbour asking for a friend?
She's hilarious. So for people who don't know the book, and people who don't know Sarah Reid, let me just say, so Sarah Reid is a friend of mine. She lives in Bexhill, which is about 10 miles east along the coast from Eastbourne. And between Eastbourne and Bexhill, on the very edge of Eastbourne town, there's this massive big new development called Sovereign Harbour, which is actually really lovely. Apparently it's the biggest marina in Europe, so I've heard, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Right.
But in my books, Dee Doran grew up on a little stretch of beach just to the east of Eastbourne, which is it is still very remote and very secluded. But when she was growing up, there was no Sovereign Harbour. So she has moved back from London in her 50s, and there's this big, massive new development that wasn't there before. So she hates it because it's changed. Her childhood memories have changed, and it's changed what she remembers of the area. But I don't hate Sovereign Harbour at all. So I did have to note of IKBU saying, actually, even though Dee hates it, it's a really lovely place, and do visit it if you come to Eastbourne.
So you don't get angry letters from locals.
Exactly.
Abby Frost would like to know, she says, I know you've written 2 series, but would you ever consider writing a standalone crime novel, which you touched on earlier on that you're working on one at the moment?
Yes, hello, Abby Frost. Yes, I never thought I'd be a crime writer who wrote series, actually. I always wanted to write standalone novels. And one of the reasons for that is, for me, character always comes before plot in my crime fiction. And one of the problems I have when I'm writing, even when I'm writing any novels I do at the moment, there are so many voices that I want to write about. And actually, my novels have often been described as kind of a crossover between police procedural and psychological thriller. And I think I don't, even though both of my novels feature a main character, I don't write just from the point of view of that character, because I really always want to explore other characters' points of view. And one of the limitations of writing a series is that you can be quite restricted to a few characters, and it's lovely that you can develop them over the series, but I've got all these other stories and all these other people's stories I want to tell as well. So I'm really hoping, and it's quite difficult if you have a publishing contract, because publishers expect, they like you to do the same thing. But my publisher at the moment signed a 4-book deal, and that was for 3 books in the Dee series and a standalone novel. So what I'm hoping is that the standalone novel, which will come out early next year, I'm hoping I can do a really good job with that. So they'll think, okay, we might let you write some more standalone novels. That's my plan, which means obviously the standalone has to be as good as it can possibly be. So I'm feeling a lot of pressure about that at the moment, I must say. But then every novel you write has to be as good as it can be. So.
Well, based on the one that I've read, and you've disappeared again, but the one that I've read and the one that I'm currently reading, I'm just popping you back in the stream now.
Okay.
I don't have any worries about the standalone one whatsoever.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to it. You've given me quite a few books to read. Marion Todd, Speak of the Devil. Hi, Sheila. I love your writing. Can I ask if you think there are any downsides to writing about the town where you live? That is a good question.
I think Marion writes from her character lives in the area that Marion lives in, so I'm sure she's as well. I guess the downside, you have to get it right, man. You have to get it right. And, I'm an outsider in this town, so it's a bit of extra pressure on me. Especially what I found really interesting is because Dee grew up in Eastbourne, which I obviously didn't with my accent. So a lot of the time she talks about her childhood memories. And there have been times where I've really worried that I've got that wrong. And clearly, if I don't like somewhere in Eastbourne, I wouldn't write that my character doesn't like it, But I think that the big downside, and also, because I have walked along the beach here in Eastbourne and seen people reading my book, and you just think, oh my God, like, if they don't like it, so that kind of like being that close to the place you're writing about, it has its risks rather than its downfalls, I think, but also, the lovely upside is that both in Eastbourne and South East London, people just loved reading books set in their local area, you know, and that describe the local area that they recognise rather than, you know, one that they've seen people describe that isn't really true, you know, and so yeah, a very well-known crime writer who I cannot name wrote a novel set in the South East London, and it was so shockingly wrong, and I suppose I don't want to do that ever, you know.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Caroline Maston, the lovely Kaz, one of our admins, says, I've read Hunting Shadows, really enjoyed it. You chose an interesting topic. And are there any subjects you wouldn't write about?
Are there? I don't think there's any subjects I wouldn't write about, and that's a really good question. And so I think Caroline asked that because the subject of Hunting Shadows is quite dark. It's about a young girl who's abducted, but not abducted for sort of sexual reasons. Abducted by a man who is got mental health problems, and he thinks he's trying to save her. I think I wouldn't. I'm not sure there's any subject I wouldn't write about, but I think there is a huge responsibility to write about things in the right way. So, for example, I would personally feel really uncomfortable writing scenes, graphically violent scenes. I understand that some writers are comfortable doing that, and that's what some readers want. Just for me. So
again, but I think I'll pop you back in once you pop back up.
Okay. So
I think they'll hear you.
Rather than a topic, I think I would certainly shy away from writing about things in a certain way, because again, you know, you have to be comfortable yourself with how you write about things. I'd probably like to avoid. I think I think the other obvious one that lots of writers try to avoid is sort of cruelty to animals, because that always just seems kind of wrong. Yes. Anyway.
And we do hear from people who get far more bad press, you know, bad responses.
I know, I've seen some comments on this
writing about animals than they do about, you know, children and grown-ups. So, I can understand steering clear of that. Kaz loves the headband, the scarf in your hair.
This is because I haven't had my hair cut since about the beginning of March, and I can't get a hair appointment with my hairdresser, so I need this because otherwise I look like I've stuck my finger in an electric plug and it's all like standing up.
No,
thank you.
Marion says, Sheila, I'm shaking my head at the lack of planning.
Who said that?
Marion Todd.
I know, Marion. I bet she was tutting away there. Tut. Marion, I hope Marion doesn't kill me, but I'm sure she would. Marion plans out her novel. Like, I'm not joking. She is the queen of planning. It's amazing. It's amazing. And that's why her books are so good, by the way.
And you have disappeared again, but we'll bear with it. And I'm sure you'll be back in a moment.
I'm still here.
There we go. You are? Good. Nobody wants to hear me talking for an hour. We're actually almost halfway through already.
Wow, God, we're flying through.
What if anything, can you tell us about the standalone? Can you tell us anything yet, or is it early days and too soon?
I think I probably might get in trouble if I told you anything. Sorry. I better not. I better not. I'm really excited by it.
No, fair enough. We'll move quickly on to one of Kaz's favourite questions. She loves to ask, would you ever make a graphic novel of one of your books?
Oh, I'd love to, but I cannot draw to save my life. Like, absolutely.
Would you hire somebody else to do it?
Yeah, you know, my daughter is really, really artistic. Actually, and this is a complete aside. Because I had a conversation with Caroline a while ago, and oh God, I can't stop talking. So my daughter's severely dyslexic, and I think I'm right in saying that Caroline has just. My daughter's severely dyslexic, and she is a classic dyslexic person who is really, really creative and arty. So I could get her to do my graphic novels, and she'd be amazing at them. So yes, Caroline, that's definitely an option.
So one of my favourite questions is your most memorable moments as an author. Whether it's good or bad, we've heard some really mad stories, things that I just didn't expect. So I love to ask this question.
Like obviously there's loads, like going back to Ireland and traveling 5 hours in a bus to a book launch that my husband's niece organized in the bookshop she worked in, and there was 3 people there, and 2 of them were friends of my mother's, and the other was a friend of my mother-in-law. That was really embarrassing. But the nicest moment I ever had was probably like all of us, there's loads of lovely moments, but one really surreal moment was a friend of mine from London came to visit. And we were in Eastbourne and we were walking along the beach, and she was saying to me, so how are the books going? And as she asked that question, a man came walking by holding a copy of Hunting Shadows in his hands. And that was just really surreal, odd moment, which hasn't happened before in that context. That was really odd. But then, and actually, probably, I think there's so many lovely moments, you know, meeting people, talking to people. Just lots of all the weird things definitely are outweighed by all the lovely things. There's so many lovely things about being an author.
Have you always written? Have you always done it for a job, or have you done other things?
So when my first book came out, loads of my old school friends got in touch to say, oh my God, you were always writing when you were in school. You always wanted to be a writer. And I don't really remember that. I did kind of write poetry and stuff when I was little. But I think I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't have the confidence for a long time. So I went to university, I finished university, I did lots of traveling, I worked in lots of different countries and just kind of did lots of stuff. And then, and I think lots of writers have this very similar experience. I have done 120 different jobs, at least. I've had so many different careers, maybe not 120, but lots. Like, you would not believe the number of careers I've had. It's absolutely stupid. And I think, when I started writing properly after my daughter was born, and she's now 14, so I started writing properly soon after she was born, because when I was on maternity leave with her, I realised that I had always wanted to be a writer, and I had tried a few times as I got older, but I'd always stopped again, and I just thought, if I don't start now, I would literally be lying on my deathbed going, I wish I'd done that. And it was that moment. So then I started writing. At the time I was on maternity leave, I thought, this is great. I'm going to write a best-selling novel. I won't go back to work. I'm going to be really rich and famous. And that's like my new future right there. Now, that was 14 years ago. So I still have the day job. So I'm still working. So that big, future didn't happen. But what did happen was I started writing and I stuck with it. And one of the key moments for me was when I started doing it and I kind of realized I could do it. And I kind of, without sounding really pretentious, certainly was a moment for me when I found my voice. I kind of worked out what kind of writer I was and how I was going to write. Before then, I was learning, I was learning how to write. When that happened to me, I just had this really quite profound moment of relief. And I just realized that all these other jobs that I'd been doing, all these things I had, and I mean, I have got this big enthusiastic personality. So I would go into things full of enthusiasm, full of, oh my God, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And 6 months later, I'd be just so bored, just thinking, no. And with the writing, I just had this great moment where I thought, this is it. This is me. All the other stuff, all the other things I've been doing, I've been looking for this feeling that this gives me. And actually that knowledge has really sustained me, and it's what's enabled me to keep writing while I'm working, while I'm looking after kids, all that stuff, because that real kind of almost like a feeling of peace, I think, just realizing who I am and where my little place in this big world is. That keeps you going through all the hard times, because there are so many hard times, as I'm sure every writer who's been interviewed for this will say, this is the hardest job I've ever done. It gives the biggest rewards, but it's the hardest in terms of work. It's the hardest in terms of sheer pig-headed stubbornness is what gets you through. You sit down every day and you find time to write, and it's so difficult, and you give up other things because of it. But I do it because I know I have to. It's who I am, So that's I can't even remember what the question was. Do you know that?
You definitely covered it. We've learned that you're not really a planner, that you try and do a bit of planning. Yeah. But do you write everything in order? Do you write, in a logical order, or do you kind of do a bit here, a bit there, and then put it back together?
No, I don't do it. I know lots of writers do a bit here and a bit there. No, I don't. So I follow. And actually, I don't know if you have read, Sam, or any people watching this, but have you read the Stephen King book on writing?
On writing, yeah.
So, you know, and basically his way of writing is kind of mine. And he says, you just sit down and you write so many words, and then you sit down the next day and you carry on writing. And that's the way I do it. But I do it consecutively. So I start at the beginning and I finish at the end. And that's probably why I'm able to do it without as much detailed planning, because, you know, I think I'd be going on forever if I was just writing random scenes and then trying to put them all together. But that when I read that book, his approach to writing, well, all of it, because it's such a brilliant book, isn't it?
Yeah, but he talks about digging up the story, doesn't he? Like, it's the whole thing that he digs up.
Yeah, no, and I do. He's really lucky, obviously, because he has the time to do that, you know. But I mean, it is quite amazing, really, to think that you can sit down and write and not know what's going to happen, but then something happens and on you go again the next day. But no, I don't write random scenes and then try and put them back together. I think I've done that a few times, but it's never really quite worked out. Or I'll write something and I think it's amazing, and I find somewhere for it to go in the book, and then always my editor will say, "I'm not sure if this really fits," and I'm like, "But this is the best bit in the book," but it's not really, you know. And actually, that's the other thing.
Killing your darlings.
Well, kill your darlings, and I think. It's really interesting. I think there is a thing, and the reason I think that all writers need editors is because there's a thing that I call self-indulgent writing. And I think we all are inclined to have bits of self-indulgent writing in our books, and we need a good editor to knock that out and to only keep in what needs to be in for the book, you know. And that can be quite painful for a writer sometimes to have to. But yeah, I'm quite good at killing my darlings, and I'm also quite good at taking my editor's advice, because I just think they know their job. That's what they're paid to do. And that's why the things for me with book titles and book covers, I don't really ever get hung up about stuff like that. I just think somebody else knows that part of the business much better than I do. So I'm just the bit that I can do is write the story. And, you know, but everyone else, I have to trust their bits of it, you know.
Do you come up with your own titles?
Let me just think. So I did with, in fact, with the Ellen Kelly books, Hunting Shadows was not my title. I can't even remember what the title was. And then the second Ellen Kelly book is called The Waiting Game. And I'm looking away because I'm just looking at the books, and that wasn't my title. So maybe I've got better at titles, because since my first two books, all the titles have been my titles, that the publishers haven't changed. So I might just be getting better at it, because I found at the beginning finding titles really difficult. It is really hard. But maybe they're just not changing them because the titles I'm giving them are better now.
I remember going on a course years ago, and a writer called Jane Wenham Jones was saying she writes prolifically for like Woman's Weekly and all the other different magazines, and she's fantastic. And she said that she just stopped calling it anything other than The Wedding or the whatever, because they always changed it, and they always came up with titles. But then on the flip side, there was Della Galton, and they always loved her titles. So it's a tricky one. Maybe it's the editor that you get. Maybe it's the person that you work with.
Maybe. I'm not sure, really. Because I don't know with that short story market. Because I think with books, obviously, the whole marketing team in a publishing company, they decide what titles work and don't work. So with my standalone, for example, the publisher has already changed the title of that slightly, only slightly, but they have. And but I'm not really. Does
that take the pressure off, though, knowing that they'll have the final say, so it's not too big a worry for you?
Weirdly, it should take the pressure off, but it doesn't at all. No. I'm not sure why. Maybe I have it right, I'm not sure, but it doesn't take the pressure off at all. I really angst and take ages over book titles, and like literally spend days, you know, probably like a lot of writers. I tend to, not with When the Dead Speak, I think that title just came to me, but certainly with I Could Be You, it took me months to find the right title for that book. And it's a line from a Bob Dylan song. And I just found it in a Bob Dylan song, and I thought, that's it. So that's what I do a lot. I look up poems and lyrics, song lyrics, until I just find the right line that has a phrase in it that works for my books.
And it really does. It's got hidden depths, that title. It really does.
It works in that book, and it works really well in the Dylan song as well, actually, because it's about, I can't remember the detail, but it's about, I can't remember, I'll have to look it up. It's about a guy in Soho looking through the window at someone else and thinking that I could be you.
So when it comes to, you said characters drive the plot.
Yeah.
Do you know before you start really what's happened to them and who they are, or does that take some time?
No, no, I don't. I might have I'll have an idea, like I'll have an outline of a character, but they only come to me when I start writing them, really. And what happens a lot is that I'll introduce a character in a book, and then they kind of, I think this happens with all writers really, then they take a life of their own. And of course, the danger is that you start to follow that character too much, you know. And actually, here in Eastbourne, the library did a book group talk with me, and one of the questions I got with that is, why are there so many characters and I could be you? And I think it's because they were just all there in my head, you know. But I don't know. I generally don't know what's going to happen to them. So with the sequel to I Could Be You, which is called When the Dead Speak, and I think I said I can't show you that because it's not out in paperback yet. The basic plot of that is the separate murder 60 years apart of two women whose bodies are found dead on the altar of a church. And I had that scenario in my head of these two kind of similar murders where the victims look really alike, the way they're killed is really alike, and their bodies are found in a church. But that's all I had. I didn't know how it happened. I didn't know who the characters were. And then I just had to start writing. And even with all of them, even though I'd say about plotting it out, I'll still have to start writing a few chapters of a book before I get a feel for the characters and a feel for where the plot is going. And then I can go back and plan it out in a bit more detail.
So what have you been reading at the moment? You said you don't only read crime, which honestly is all I read at the moment because of you lovely authors. I try and read as much as possible before I actually meet you. But when you're writing, do you read crime or do you stick to something else, or do you just kind of read lots of things anyway?
Actually, to be honest with you, recently, and I'm only looking around, I'm going to show you two books I've read recently. At the moment, I'm reading a lot of crime because I review crime fiction for a review site. So I get sent a lot of books, which is great.
Yeah.
And I recently read, I'm going to hold this up to you. I got sent this book, which is called Our Fathers, which isn't on the title. But I can't know if you can see there. I'll show you the side. It's called Our Fathers by Rebecca Waite.
Oh, yeah.
Have you read it?
No.
Oh my God,
it's so we can see it. No, not one that I've read so far, but I'll put it on my list.
Well, it's almost not crime. It's called Our Fathers. It's so beautiful. It's about a boy called Tom. It's on this really remote island in Scotland, and when he's 10 years old, his father shoots the rest of his family, and then he comes back to this island as an adult to try to find out what happened. And it's absolutely beautiful. It's really lyrical. It's wonderful. And I'm going to show that again because I love it so much. Can't get this camera angle.
The author's Rebecca Waite.
Rebecca Waite, there we go. Our Father's Rebecca Waite. So I've read that recently, and also, which I bet loads of people have read on this site. Can you see that?
The loser.
The closer I get.
Oh, the closer I get. Sorry, you were too close. It looked like it said the loser. The closer I get. Yeah, I can see that now.
And so he's a well-known. Now he is published by Orenda Books, who published some amazing crime fiction, including Helen Fitzgerald, who you guys had on the other night.
We did. She was fabulous.
Well, she is. Now, can I just say, I know we're completely going off topic on me at the moment, but
okay.
Her book, the one that got nominated for the Theakstone Prize.
The Ashes?
No, better than that. Which is The Ashes is brilliant. It's the other one, Ash Mountain. So Ash Mountain is brilliant, but she wrote this other book about the Glaswegian social worker. And I can't remember what it's called. It is one of the best and funniest and most shocking books I've read in such a long time. And I'm tweeting madly about it and tweeting madly to her about it because it is amazing. Anyway, this is also amazing. This Paul Burston book, also published by Orenda Books, and who do just publish some great stuff. Anyway, so I'd really recommend that.
So your stories build really well. You still manage to vary the pace in them, but they build and they develop. How hard is it you make it look so easy? How hard is it to do that?
I think it's hard, but I think it's something I think about a lot. I think about it a lot. And I think, and I'm sure again, lots of writers would say this, that it really helps early on in your career to have a really good editor who makes you think about pace all the time. And that takes me back again to that kind of self-indulgent writing, that when you work with a really good editor early on, you quite quickly are able to see yourself. So, and I have definitely got better at, as I'm writing a book, looking at every chapter and saying, does this really bring the story along? Because in the past, when I was sort of writing at the start of my career, I would look at a piece and I think, yeah, this brings the story on. This tells you more about this character, but it doesn't really bring the story on. So I'm very alert. I'm very aware of having to do that. And I think constantly about pace. And what I also do, early on in my writing career, I won an apprenticeship for a year with Martin Waits, who's another writer. And he was brilliant, Martin. He's lovely. He's just completely lovely. And that was really good because he really gave me a lot of confidence as well, because I wasn't published at that stage. But one of the things Martin spoke to me about was something that people who work in theatre talk a lot about, is something called the dramatic W. So you think of a W shape, which means you start with a lot of action and then you slow the pace down again until you get to the middle of a novel, and then you crunch up the action again, and then you slow the pace back down, and then until you kind of building up to the pace towards the end. And very loosely in my head when I'm writing, I always have that structure in mind. So I'm kind of, and even though the structure is quite loose in my mind, when I go back over my final edits, I sort of generally I can see that's structure is quite loose, but because it's there in my head, I think about that a lot as I'm writing. And I notice it now a lot when especially when I read books in my Kindle, I'm at the 50% mark and I'm going, yeah, here.
What advice, obviously you're a writing tutor as well, what advice would you give to somebody writing the debut novel?
I suppose the advice I always give is word count more than anything, is consistency. You know, I have met lots of aspiring writers who either don't write their novel because they don't have time, or they are constantly going on creative writing courses, or they're constantly researching their idea for the novel. Now, I would say, first of all, everyone has time. You do have time, even if you think you don't. I wrote, my first 3 novels were all written by getting up early in the morning before everyone else in the house was up and writing. That was my writing time. Creative writing courses are great, and so are being part of a creative writing group, but they shouldn't be instead of writing. And I think I really understand why people do that. But basically, I would say to everyone, be honest with yourself, because I think a lot of people do that because it's a great way of putting off actually sitting down and writing, which is a really scary thing to do at the beginning. So I think the top things I would say is carve out some time for yourself each week. It doesn't have to be every day. If you can carve out 3 hours a week, wherever you can fit it in, do it. That's one thing. Number 2, really important, set yourself a daily word count. That's really, really important. And number 3, I think I think the thing that debut writers don't really understand is how shockingly difficult this business is. So I think be prepared for the long haul. This isn't going to happen overnight. You are committing. It's a lifelong commitment, and it takes time. But if you are committed and if you work hard, and you do have to work hard, you know, you will get there, but you have to just keep going and believe in yourself. And the other thing I would say for writers who've written their first novel and they're sending it to agents and they're repeatedly getting negative responses from agents, I think it doesn't mean that book isn't good, but it might mean that you move on that book now and go back to it later. Because if I also know writers who have spent years desperate to get that one novel published, and you're just wasting time. You know, if you're a writer, you've got more than one book in you anyway. So just put that book in a drawer and come back to it 2 or 3 years' time when you've written another novel and you found somebody who wants to publish that.
We did have somebody who said that lately, that I don't know if it was Helen Fitzgerald, but I don't want to guess. We've spoken to a lot, but there was somebody, a female, who said the first 3 books didn't go anywhere. It was the 4th book that really took off.
Well, my first book, so my first 2 books that I wrote didn't go anywhere. The first book was the one I finished with Martin Waits, and on the back of that, I had it was read by an agent who then called me in for a meeting and very sweetly said to me, "I really like your book, but I'm not going to publish it, but go away and write another book and I might publish that one." So then I went away and wrote a book, and she didn't publish that book either, which was heartbreaking. So then I wrote a 3rd book, and that book got published.
So which one was the 3rd one?
The 3rd one was Hunting Shadows, which, and if you've read it, you know that there's quite a lot of Ellen's backstory in that novel. And the reason there's so much backstory in that novel is because there actually is a prequel, which never got published. and it never will get published. Still time for that. It won't get published now because loads of that plot went into I Could Be You. And that's what happens, I think, with those books that don't get written. You know, if you're clever, not if you're clever, but, you know, eventually those bits of storylines that you never want to let go of, or those characters that you don't want to let go of. So that very first book that I wrote, and the character from that who I loved, she's now, a different version of her is the main character in the standalone novel that I'm just writing. So you see, they're all still there.
I love that, recycling.
Yes, exactly. Recycling my characters.
Caroline Maston has asked, has lockdown affected your writing? A lot of writers have said no. I don't know how it's been for you.
Okay, so my lockdown experience is probably a bit different to everyone else's for several reasons. So first of all, before lockdown, I was working from home anyway, and I was homeschooling my daughter because she hasn't been very well. Since lockdown, weirdly, my life has been better because my husband wasn't working during lockdown, so he was home. My son, who's 18, was home as well. And so my husband kind of took over all of the shopping, all of the childcare, all of that stuff, which gave me, weirdly, more time to write than I've had in months. And now the first few weeks of lockdown, I couldn't write. I think a lot of writers have similar experiences, really distracted. But since then, I've been able to be quite organized with my day. So I do my day job and then I do my writing. But it's been quite nice. It's been less busy for me in a really nice way because I've just had a bit more time. Now, my husband went back to work last week, which is most inconvenient.
Absolutely. How rude.
So, you know, I think I just have to accept that was a time that I was able to do that, you know, but it was lovely, actually, you know, and I really appreciate that we were lucky to be able to say that because lots of people haven't, you know, been able to say that at all, you know.
Yeah. We have a few more questions. Caroline wants to know, would you write in other genres?
Oh, Caroline, do you know what? I would. The only other genre that I would like to write in is young adult crime fiction. But I think I just don't think I'm a other type of writer, really. I think I'd love to think I'd write an amazing literary fiction novel, but I just don't think that's me. I have dabbled with a bit of young adult crime fiction and actually did write a young adult novel, but that was the same publisher who at the time who published Hunting Shadows and my other books, and then they wanted that book and then they didn't want any more books. So, but yeah, so I would do that, but probably not anything else.
Quite a longer one from Kaz. I liked that in Hunting Shadows, the bad guy had a lot of motivations given for his quite shocking behaviour. The shades of grey in a character is fab. Is it hard to write someone like that?
That's
so that's Brian.
Caroline. Yes, I know. No, it's not hard to write something like that. And actually, so many things to say about Brian. And my face has gone again, hasn't it?
It has, but I'm sure you'll be back again in a moment. Here you come. In now.
I do really realise, I do believe that there are, you know, that we have psychopaths in the world and people who are intrinsically evil. But my husband is a criminal defence lawyer, and not just because of this, but partly through the stories I hear from him. I also think there's an awful lot of people in the world who do bad things because bad things have happened to them. And Brian is a classic of that. And when I wrote that book, you know, my children were both really young. And one of the kind of recurring themes in my books, that's something I'm kind of constantly fascinated with for loads of reasons, is the effect that a damaged childhood has on an adult. Because I think that effect is very profound. And, you know, it's certainly for me, Brian, who was the kind of nasty person in Hunting Shadows. He's as much a victim as everyone else, I think, really. And what really interested me about him was his vulnerability, actually, and how damaged he was by the things that happened to him as a child. And certainly the wider answer to Caroline's question is I'm much more interested in the shades of grey, I think, generally, than in the sort of black and white, because I think we're all shades of grey, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And he, you do really feel for him.
Yeah.
The situations, I'm not going to go into it. I don't want to spoil anything. Spoilers are my pet hate them. But you really do feel for him, and you can see all the way through how his childhood has affected him, and he's just trying to put it right.
Yeah. And I read a Matt Haig quote recently. Matt Haig, who writes really movingly about depression. And
I've actually got one of his books on the shelf behind me.
Which one is it?
Let me look. It is called Reasons to Stay Alive. I haven't actually read it yet.
Oh my God.
So my lovely friend Kate recommended this book to me. She thought it would be really
Absolutely,
really good thing for me to read. You've disappeared again. But yeah, so while you've disappeared, that's Matt Haig, Reasons to Stay Alive. We've heard really, really wonderful things about it. And I'm just going to pop you back into the feed.
That's fine.
Oh, we're getting good at this.
You're getting brilliant at it. Well, that book is, for anyone watching this who has ever suffered from depression, it is the most life-affirming, beautiful. It's like a Bible, and it's like something to hold on to if you're going through a bad time. It's amazing. Anyway, I read an amazing quote from him the other day. I can't remember it exactly, but it was something about, he was describing being a confused young child, and basically saying how there were so many adults going about the place. They're confused young childs in adults' bodies because they've never been able to grow up properly. And that interests me a lot, actually. And so many of those people who really need help rather than punishment, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way at it. I hope it's something you're going to explore more in other novels, because the way you write him, I'm hoping is exactly in my head as you wanted him to come across.
I hope so.
Because you are quite conflicted by him, but you can see the whole picture. You can see the big picture with Brian.
Yeah. And I suppose, I think probably the same for lots of people, but I think for me, growing up in Ireland in the 80s, we have got this legacy really of damage that was done to young people. And my father, for example, has been played a very active role in Ireland in getting retribution for people who were damaged in the industrial homes and things. And I just think it's something you're very aware of, I think, if you've grown up in Ireland in the year I did, you're aware of the damage that was done to the generation that just came before us,
Right.
I think, that's probably a bigger thing, I think, maybe for some Irish people of my generation than it might be for people from other countries, maybe. I don't know.
Jason Kelly's asked, do your books need to be read in order? Now, obviously, I've read the first Ellen Kelly book. So would it have mattered if I'd have read them out of order?
Can I just say hello, Jason? I love Jason.
Everybody loves Jason. The ladies love Jason.
Jason, I would prefer if you read the books in order, and they don't have to be, but I guess just because I like my two main characters, I'd like you to see their story from start to finish rather than the middle. And I'm really glad you asked a question. Thank you.
He's got another one, which I'll come back to in a minute. But how hard is it when you've written 3 Ellen Kelly books so far? I'm really hoping that we do get to find that there's a fourth. I can email the publisher. Don't know whether that would help, but we could give it a go. Yeah. How hard is it to keep that continuation of the character developing throughout?
It's not as hard as you think, actually. It's going to be possibly more. It's not hard. It wasn't hard at all with Ellen. I knew exactly where Ellen was going. I knew exactly what her story was. I think it's slightly harder with Dee because she's slightly older. So I'm not really answering this question very well. Let me have a think. It's easier than you'd expect, but I think with Dee, and I'll tell you, what I'm finding hard with Dee is where my heart is wanting to go with her. and where my publisher is wanting to go with her. I think there's a bit of a, and I think my publisher's probably right, but I'm immensely fond of Dee, so I want nice things to happen to her.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. She's lovely, and I can't wait to, not that I'm trying to rush you off, but we have got 5 minutes and I have got a third of a book left to read. Jason's other question was, what authors have been an influence on your writing? So you mentioned Stephen King's on writing.
Stephen King's book on writing, yeah. Obviously Harlan Coben, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Weirdly, but obviously, you know, one of the, I mean, without sounding horribly pretentious, a book that did have a really profound effect on me was James Joyce Dubliners, his collection of short stories, which I read when I was in my early 20s, which I just thought was absolutely incredible. In terms of crime fiction, every good crime writer I read, basically, and sometimes, you know, this, for me at the moment, I mean, Helen Fitzgerald, I just think she is amazing. Megan Abbott, an American crime writer, Megan Abbott, I absolutely love her books. I love how she writes.
I'm not familiar with Megan Abbott.
Oh my God, you must read Megan Abbott. She is amazing. Gillian Flynn. At the moment, a lot of really good female crime writers, because of the way they write women. They write women so amazingly well. And it's why I love that Helen Fitzgerald book, which name I can remember now, called Worst Case Scenario. Helen Fitzgerald, Gillian Flynn, Megan Abbott, they all write about women in a way that's so real and so rarely seen in any type of fiction. They are geniuses, the three of them.
Oh, it's really nice when I hear authors talk about who their heroes are when we're getting to talk to you, and I'm nearly through the second book that I'm reading. I absolutely love them. We're almost out of time, Sheila. I can't believe how fast that hour has gone.
Oh, it's just been so
can you give us a recap of your book covers so everybody knows what to look out for?
Lovely, yes.
And just give us a quick, a quick read through of.
Do you want to do all of them?
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
Okay. Hunting Shadows, Ellen Kelly, book 1, about a little girl who goes missing. The Waiting Game. Oh, I love The Waiting Game because this is Ellen Kelly, book 2. And the reason I love The Waiting Game is it's got a really viciously nasty female baddie in it, and she's great. She's really bad, and she was such fun to write. Oh, and then All Things Nice, which is Ellen Kelly, book 3, which is basically really, really about the damage that's done to people when they're young and the effect that has as an adult. It's also my favorite book cover of all my covers. I do love that book. And then I Could Be You, which is my first Dee Doran novel set in Eastbourne. And can I just say about this book, lots of people, including my parents, think that's me on the cover, but it's not. It's really not. And it's really about a young woman who is miserable in her life and she wishes that she could be somebody else. And again, another example of somebody who's an adult who's a bit damaged by her childhood. There you go. Bit of a common theme there, I'm afraid.
Well, this is where I'm up to. I don't know if you can see it. Oh. Chapter 39, Katie, 4 years earlier. That's where I'm up to on my Kindle at the moment. But we've just lost you again. I'd really love your smiling face just at the end. So hopefully we can pop you back in. Oh, here we go.
Here I go.
And that way we can actually give you a wave goodbye. Right? Oh, no, you've gone again.
Well, tell me I'm live now. I'm just kicking
you out again. Kicking you out and putting you back in. Here we go. Yay. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know we've had some technical difficulties, but I think we've skated through. I think we're okay.
Thank you so much. That was so lovely. And thank you to everybody in this amazing book club. I hope you know that us writers just love it so much and we're so grateful. Yeah. You guys are incredible.
Me and the admins are thrilled today. It's David Gilchrist, actually, who's the founder, Caroline's dad.
That's right.
She was member 2 of the club and David was the founder. He put a message on thanking everybody for getting him through the lockdown, and he couldn't have been more spot on. It's kept me sane. Absolutely. Well, it's been wonderful. So I'd love to meet you.
Group. Yeah, and it's so lovely to meet you, Sam. Yeah. And thank you everyone for asking questions and making this such a really lovely hour. Yeah, I'm really grateful.
And I hope we can get you back when one of the new books is out. I think we'll go there.